Hello, everybody. Welcome to Witches Movie Coven. Our dear Ms. Patti Negri and Courtney Buckley, they are off on magic adventures. So I am going to be doing a little bit of the hosting part. I'm going to do my best Patti impersonation tonight. You might see that. We have with us a couple of wonderful guests. I cannot wait to speak to you. In fact, why don't we go ahead and start with our guests? I am Richard-Lael, and first we have Markus Ironwood. Markus, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, this is very exciting. I'm glad to be on here. I'm one of the publicists at Llewellyn, so I tell Jason what to do in terms of like interacting with the public. Take that for how you will. I send him books. So it's very fun. I really enjoy it. It's a really great gig to be able to work with so many fabulous witches. And I like to say that Heather's the beginning of the line. I'm the end of the line when it comes to a book's life.
That is amazing. Well, welcome. We are so glad to have you here. And we also have special guest tonight. I'm sorry, it's Gwion, correct?
Yes, well done. That's perfect.
Well, I try to say them. I try to say everyone's name as well as I can because Gwion, my name is Richard-Lael, as you know, so people go. So I want to make certain that your name was spoken correctly. Gwion, why don't you tell us about yourself?
As Markus said, he's sort of the end of the line with book publishing. I'm usually where good books go to die because I'm stuck in a bit of a writer's block at the moment. So no, it's not true. I'm writing a bit now. All the things. I'm a witch. I'm a pagan. I'm an author. I'm a cook. I'm a musician. A movie buff. I'm
a mother, I'm a sinner, I'm a saint.
That's right. Yeah. I'm all those things and, nothing. And
a fan of the Lionesses right now, too.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah, Absolutely. Well done, Lady Lions.
And of course, we should go ahead and we're going to go over to Ms. Heather Greene because Heather Greene, as we have been told, is the start of all things. Hello, Heather Greene.
I am not the start of all things. I'm the start of some things, but not all things. I am an author and I am an editor at Llewellyn. That's how what Markus was referring to. I'm an acquisitions editor, so I bring the authors in and usher them through the process till they get to Markus and beyond. I am also a journalist covering all kinds of things that are occult and witchcraft for mainstream media, which is super fun interacting in that world. I work with wonderful authors, and I also wrote my own book because I am a film historian. You can tell I'm a Gemini, right? Like all the things are happening at once. Lights, Camera, Witchcraft, which is the definitive guide to witches and witchcraft represented in American movies. So that's who I am.
Thank you, Heather Greene. Always a pleasure. And now we go to Goldilocks himself.
Back after another week off. Heather is the alpha. Markus is the omega. They are the beginning and ending of all things Llewellyn. I'm Jason. I've written 9 books for Llewellyn. Some of them have even been successful. So that's been exciting. And I've spent much of my summer traveling from pagan festival to pagan festival throughout the United States. This is my latest book. This is Modern Witchcraft with the Greek Gods, which came out in December. Yeah. So good to be back. I miss my family when I'm away from you all. It breaks my heart when I'm not on the show.
Well, we miss you too.
We always miss you. We always miss you. And I'm so glad that you are back for this one because we were considering doing Sword in the Stone.
That was my idea because it's only 80 minutes. I didn't have a lot of time, and I was like, let's do a quick movie, not a 2-hour and 20-minute movie. And I was outvoted.
Oh, is that all that it was? 2 hours?
It seems like it goes on forever.
Speaking
of which, we are doing the 1981 classic. It is called Excalibur. Excalibur, of course, not the hotel in Vegas. That would have been far more exciting. Heather Greene is actually here dressed as Morgan Le Fay, and that's why she's so lovely and her shiny and Heather, you should show your hair because
It's
it
the
is-
pony, Heather.
Yeah.
It's the pony.
I can't. I don't know which way is her.
Is that Heather Greene or is that Heather Mirren? I can't tell. I'm so confused.
Exactly.
So confusing.
And speaking of Heather Greene, why don't you go ahead and tell us, Heather Greene, about how this film plays in the witchcraft realm?
Okay, so this being a joint film that was made by the UK film industry and the US film industry, although mostly by UK, I didn't focus tremendously on it, similar to some other films we've talked about, because my book was particularly on American film, and there was a reason. You can read about that in the introduction when you buy it. But there's a lot of good things. The UK culture, the culture there and the culture here, especially when it comes to films, was very aligned. You get a lot of similar things going on with the cultures, not exactly, but similar. I'm sure Gwion can speak to that. But what you find is this movie is coming out in 1981. So if everyone who was around at that time, alive at that time, can go back to that period of time, and you're going to see the end of the witchcraft craze in movies. So with the end of the hardcore witchcraft stuff that we're seeing, the ones we like, Rosemary's Baby and Carrie and the occult stuff, that starts to wane, and we start to move into a more conservative period of time in the US and in the UK, and you start to get a lot of what I call they're known as sword and sorcery films. In the early 80s and throughout the 80s until the late 80s, you get a plethora, an abundance of sword and sorcery films. So just to, whet your appetite and jog your memory, I wrote a bunch down so I would remember. But think of, you have Krull, you have Highlander, you have Conan the Barbarian, you have Beastmaster, Clash of the Titans, Willow's later in 88, Dragon Slayer, Labyrinth is 86, Lady Hawk 85, Sword and Sorcerer 82, Dark Crystal. You even have comedy like Princess Bride. The idea of this, not only the hero's adventure or the hero's journey, is very prevalent. There are also a lot of epic themes, lots of swords, lots of sorcery, lots of battles, lots of medieval. This is very, very popular. So all of the magic movies at this period of time, not all of them, most of them, are really geared into this genre, the sword and sorcery genre. And I just listed a few of them. Neverending Story, another one of my favorites. And this really, a lot of people attribute this to the popularity of Star Wars and the popularity of the epic science fiction, because it's not just epic fantasy, it's also epic science fiction. And really, Star Wars, the first one and the second one, its success sort of was part of the success of this, was part of the spark of this. And that is also a hero's journey story. It is a medieval hero story's journey set in a different time. So you get this, and some are great. Some of them are really fun to watch. I love the Dark Crystal. We talked about Jim Henson. It didn't, we can talk about whether it's still watchable today or not, but that one, and there are some that are really, really bad, because it's very hard to make a movie like this good. Really, really, really tough to make a really good Lord of the Rings from the 2000s. Very good version, very good filmmaking in this genre. Some of these I'm talking about, not so much. So that is where this film fits in. And even though it's a UK-US film, it fits into that that motif, that thread, that popularity of what was going on at the time in the early 80s. And there are a lot of Christian themes, there's a lot of religious themes. Again, this fits into what was going on in a conservative period of time that was really trying to right itself and figure out the morality and ethics after a very tumultuous progressive period.
You also had sort of the rise of Dungeons and Dragons at the same time.
Exactly.
And this plays directly into that and the popularity of that particular game. Also, let us never forget the awesomeness of the Saturday morning Dungeons and Dragons cartoon show. Perhaps one of the 5 greatest cartoons ever made.
Wait, what about Grayskull. He-Man.
Masters of the Universe,
Man.
Masters of the Universe. Same thing.
Skeletor, Beastman, the figures Jason collects.
Hey, I totally see you on that. That's good. That's all good. That's absolutely true.
And for those who may not have seen the film, because there are a few of you, I always like to give a little bit of a synopsis so that people can follow along and they can understand what is happening. So for those of you who have not seen Excalibur, good for you.
I can't wait till I get straight.
You're giving it away too early.
So this film is it's the story of King Arthur, and it goes like this. Captain Picard finds himself fighting Klingons in a land long, long ago, far, far away. And then there's a lady of a lake, and then there's a man who has intercourse with his sister, who is actually Arthur, and he produces a son who dresses like C-3PO, and then he kills his mother because she's now old, and there's a fog, and then He-Man comes out, and then Gargamel comes out and smashes the Smurfs. There's only, the cast is great. I will tell you, the cast is great. You know, Sir Patrick Stewart and Liam Neeson and Helen Mirren and that guy. I don't know who that is.
Oh my God, really? Oh my God. Only one of the finest actors of all time. Gosh.
So who wants to go first and give their take on this hot take?
On the movie?
I
would like to go first. Even though somebody in the comments said, given the weird languagey bits in it, that they hate the movie with a passion. I absolutely adore this movie. I watch this movie at least once a year, usually when I'm really looking for inspiration or when I'm missing England a lot and I want to connect back to England. I adore this movie. Now, just to be, particularly fair.
To be fair, it came out in 1981. So you have to look at things like CGI didn't exist, right? A lot of the special effects that you might think of today didn't exist. So they did a tremendous amount with lighting. That was the real special effect that they used a lot of in this movie, was really clever lighting. But I'm going to tell you all the things I love about this movie before Jason and others destroy it for you. So first, the interesting thing about this movie, like when it came out, and Heather mentioned a bunch of other movies that were sort of around at the same time or came after it. If you go back and you watch that list of movies, it's not supposed to be in England. Okay. So if you go look at other movies that were around at the time, this was the heaviest of the movies. It was weighty. If you watch some of the first scenes that come out, there's a thudding to the horse's hooves that you didn't find in other movies. There was heavy armor that was laborious to move around in. There's scenes where they're fighting in mud and blood and streams and whatnot. And it's a really hard slog. There's nothing easy about these fighting scenes. And if you look at all the movies that were done before, it was sort of the swashbuckling, daring do, very light armor, people running around. So this was the first movie that had some heft to it and some weight to it and a real darkness to it. And that was particularly different. There was also, again, for the time, lots of squishy, thuddy sounds as axes and swords and whatnot pierced armor. And that was really, really different. And then it also did an interesting thing, I think, where, rather than the Thomas Mallory version of, the Arthur stories, this was more like the Gretchen Detroit movies and writings. And so it was a little bit older. It mixed up some of the mythology a little bit, but in an interesting way. That it told bits of the story, like the Fisher King and the Wasteland. Like it puts all of that in there that had never been in a movie before. So although the mythology is a little mixed, it points to some really interesting
parts of these myths, which were, depending on what sources you believe, they were, French Romantic, they were early Britain, they were holdovers from, the period after the Dark Ages, after the fall of the Roman Empire, and so all kinds of things like that, and historically some neat places in as well. It talks about Cornwall and Tintagel, which are real places in England, or at the time, sort of Britain, as it would have been. But yeah, it's got some really neat pieces in it, and that's what I love about it. Not to mention, I know Jason disagrees. I love the music, even though some of it was odd choices. There's some brilliant music in it. When they play, what is it? Carmina Burana. Yeah, it's absolutely stunning as Arthur's coming back to life.
It's embarrassing and a cliche.
And the only thing that I can think of
was the man with the 1980s perm.
This is all natural. This is all natural. It.
When they were playing Carmina Burana, all I could think of, give me salsa cookies, send him to North Korea.
Yeah.
Yes. Who wants to go next?
Let's let Heather go next because she likes this movie too, and then we can destroy it, Richard-Lael.
Well, I think we need to ask Markus because he's our guest. I'll wait. I'm waiting. I'm waiting. Markus?
Well, I'll say I didn't hate it. I didn't hate
mind
those
it.
2 hours
I
and
didn't
20
mind
minutes.
it. That's the proper word, the proper phrase for this.
The show.
I didn't
Heather
mind
Greene's
it.
shirt is here. This is Heather Greene has. I didn't mind it. So you didn't mind it.
I certainly didn't mind it. I was watching. For a little bit back. I took several Arthurian courses in college. I've loved the Arthurian story. Like I've read Mist of Avalon too many times in my teens and 20s. Not recently, but so I know the Arthurian stories inside and out. I was the little gay kid in the woods listening to Lorena McKennitt. Like I am the Lady of Shalott. Like at the loom. So I love Arthur stuff. So I'm like, ooh, Arthur movie. Like let's get into this. It was a trip. Exactly. It was heavy. I didn't quite think of using that word, but you're absolutely right, Gwion. It is really heavy. The armor is super heavy. They are in the mud. Like the lighting is either like high mirror polish, including on top of Merlin's head. That was a real choice that I would love to hear what other people think, because I'm not sure what that was about, but I love like all the tiaras and the jewels and the breastplate armor, like something about that just in my mind, like that crazy breastplate.
But did you like the spray painted gold wall?
I didn't know what to make of the medals, like especially when Lancelot is like losing his damn mind, and there's the Mordred is in gold and then in an egg, and when it gets trippy, that's where I was like, we've lost the plot.
C-3PO right there, my friend.
Fully. I was like, okay,
it's the drum, the lost child. Come on now.
Yeah, he lost me. That's what he lost child. He lost me. I was out. That's when I kind of lost faith in this ever coming back. It was really over the top in kind of a good way. I don't know. There was a lot about it. I love the wedding scene where everyone is like in that mirror polished armor and like almost has like popped collars worth of armor. I was just like, and like just enough like neck to be exposed to kind of like I don't know, it was interesting, and they're like chiseled jawlines. I gotta look at then there's that scene where he's dreaming and fighting himself and he's like all naked and stuff.
I mean,
I liked that.
That's a great scene. Mhm.
I like
It feels
that.
like it was stolen directly from Empire Strikes Back. That's
Mhm.
that
Yep.
scene to me feels
Yeah.
like it was inspired by Empire, which had come out the previous year.
Mhm.
I know it
Yeah.
takes a long time to make movies, so maybe that's not the case.
When
Coming
Luke
off the
goes
heels
into
of
the
Empire,
cave,
it really looked
Yeah.
kind of cheesy.
Yeah.
the scene where
Yeah.
Luke goes into the cave.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, with it being 2 hours and 20 minutes long, how much was shot? I mean, the Arthur story is so long. To condense it into one movie and get everything from the Fisher King to Morgan Le Fay to all these other pieces that involve the story, like, that's a huge undertaking. Like, if something like this was done today, it'd be a 3-part.
Yeah.
Like Uther would be half or 3/4 of the first movie. Anyways, yeah, it was wild. It was wild. And I think that those earlier movies, like Heather and Jason just said, totally influenced this. Star Wars is kind of all over this in some very real ways. So I don't know. It was wild. I would love to hear what other people think about the costumes because they were crazy.
Well, Marcus, the bit you've said this a few times about like Star Wars was all over it. I know Heather mentioned that earlier. And it's really interesting, right? Because Heather mentioned the hero's journey, right? The kind of Joseph Campbell reference there. But if you think about it, Star Wars, it is the same story. It's a young boy looking to an unknown and uncertain future who meets up with an older mythical magician, Obi-Wan, and gets a magical sword to go off and fight the evil empire. It is exactly the same thematically, and there's other influences in that as well. So it's really lovely, and then it blends the myths again, sometimes successfully, sometimes not, but it blends the myths of Britain, England, Wales. It pulls on some Irish mythology as well in the movie that wouldn't necessarily have been in the myth. So, and then stuff from the continent as well, from France. So it really was all over the place, but in a delightful way, I thought.
I'm going to jump in here, and I think we don't often talk about men in witchcraft at the show because 90% of the movies that we talk about, the witches and the magical people, are women. It's most American movies and shows that feature witchcraft and in movies are usually about women's empowerment and a woman's coming of age. That's what it's mainly an allegory for. And I'll talk about that over and over again because that's just a reality of what we see mostly. The most of the male witches don't have any kind of legacy. They don't have these kind of stories. And I talk about this in my book and where they fit into that, because these are usually not the hero's journey. And the hero's journey is, in Hollywood movies, the coming of age story for men. So for women, it's different. You're 16. It's the fairy tale is what we have for women for the most part. And take this or leave this as good or bad. I'm not judging. I'm just saying this is what Hollywood presents. Hollywood presents the woman's coming of age as more like the fairy tale. The boy's coming of age is the hero's journey. And so you see it in Star Wars. You see it here. You see it in Harry Potter. That's exactly what Harry Potter is. The same thing. It's that hero's journey. And so when you see in magical movies a coming of age story, typically the boy is not magical, with the few exceptions. We tried it in the Covenant, didn't we? We loved the Covenant. I didn't mind the Covenant, right? And
it's nice to look at.
It's a movie.
I didn't mind it.
It's a movie.
It's a movie.
It was
But
a movie.
you don't really very rarely see it. No, in this case, the magical person is, again, not the male coming of age story, but that's what we're having here. And that's what most of these stories are. Dragon Slayer, exactly the same thing. Beastmaster, Conan the Barbarian. Most of the magical people in these are women around the sides who are causing problems, who are negative witches, who are evil witches associated with Satan, who are associated with badness, which is what you have in Morgan Le Fay here, or Morgana as she's called. So
You even have the snake imagery with her.
exactly, there's heavy
at
Christian.
the
There's
end.
heavy Christian overlay in the morality and the ethics that are presented in these, and what's good. And usually, the witch or the sorceress or the magical is usually in these cases a dangerous woman. So I'm just pointing that out now for my review of this film. I love and hate this film in so many ways. The things I love about this film, I love the lore, but there are moments in this, and the costumes are fun. There are pieces. There's moments in these films that are just juicy and just fun. I love the irreverence that way they treat Merlin. I mean, what is it? Percival just walks by and bonks him, and he just falls over, or like the scene where he just like falls into the water, just like bang. I'm like, okay, there's this irreverence to his character, which is totally so ridiculous. I enjoy it. I laugh, which is so inappropriate for this type of the heaviness of a movie like this. Why am I laughing? So there's pieces like this that are so irreverent and so throwaway that I'm like, why is it there? It makes no sense. But I just enjoy those little moments. I enjoy, there's great actors in the movie. And there's some things that are just irresistible about it. But at the same time, the dialogue is laughable. I mean, sometimes they say stuff and I'm like, rolling my eyes like, this is horrible, this is so terrible. And I think some of the timing, like too much time on the battle scene, too short time dealing with the affair between Gwion, I don't think the timing of the storytelling was exactly on. So there's a lot of problems with it, but it's a cult film. People love it. And it didn't change anything. What it did do, though, was really launch a lot of acting careers. And it has a place and it survived. I think the depth, the heaviness, most of these films didn't have the level of nudity in it that we see in this film. The heaviness, the blood, like you said, in American films that started more in the 60s and 70s where you start to see that level. But here's something that was hysterical. There's just weird moments. So when she has the sword, when Guinevere has the sword in the cloth towards the end and is giving the sword back to him after everything had happened, he pulls the sword out of the cloth, right? And there's a metal sound of him taking it out of a metal sheath. There's like
there's no
sound.
sheath.
Like, where did that? She was holding it in a cloth. Where did that metal come from? I'm like, so there's just like these little bizarrities that are like silly. And, but there's just, in all of its ridiculousness, there's something about it that I just, I'm like, I just enjoy. There's something about it I just enjoy. So I'd rather watch this than The Muppets Wizard of Oz. Sorry, Richard-Lael.
No, you know what? I agree with you wholeheartedly on that one. I agree. 100%.
There's just something about it, It's something about Mary. I'm just saying that.
I'm torn. I would almost rather watch The Muppets Wizard of Oz.
Oh, okay.
Let me preface this. This is an Arthurian encyclopedia, and I own many things like this at the house because I love the stories of King Arthur. I wish they could get it right in a movie, and they never have.
Yeah.
This one comes maybe the closest, but it's still absolutely wrong in so many ways. I think it is a noble failure, right? There are parts of this movie that maybe were good, but the problem is that there are too many parts that are bad. There are actors who are completely miscast. Nigel Terry is not my Arthur, especially early on when he's drawing the sword from the stone and he's supposed to be 19. It was like, I wouldn't follow that. I wouldn't follow him into a supermarket, right? I mean, I was like, wow, like I'm supposed to believe this is King Arthur? That Courtney, like they do it better in The Sword and the Stone sometimes, and that hurts me to say out loud.
Well, they did it better in Monty Python in some places
Yes,
as well. Is
they
in
did do it better in Monty
Holy
Python in
Grail.
some places.
And
Absolutely.
but in all of those fight scenes, the only thing that I heard in my mind was "'Tis but a scratch."
It's so
It's only a
true.
flesh wound.
And, yeah. All right, then we'll call it a draw. You know, like I was kind of expecting something like that a few times. The armor's beautiful. I mean, that might be the best part of the whole film are the costumes, the armor. The performances are really hit and miss. I didn't like Lancelot particularly a lot. I was like, I could best that guy, and I can't win a fight with my cat. So that didn't ring right. I think I told Gwion too because we were talking about this. One of the things I really dislike about this film is the soundtrack. I like the music of Richard Wagner. Don't get me wrong, but to hear it all of a sudden in a King Arthur movie when it's so recognizable already is really unsettling. And then you're kind of having a traditional, like, kind of medieval music in the background in places, and then there's the bombast of the Wagner and the other thing we've already made fun of that I can never remember the name of.
Carmina
Carmina
Burana.
Burana.
Yeah, and it just doesn't
Which
Which is
work.
30s,
It
by
doesn't
the
work.
way.
John Williams was in his prime at
Yeah.
this particular period in the world. Like, there's not a theme for Excalibur. There's not a theme for Arthur or
Right.
Lancelot or Guinevere or Morgana. Are you kidding me? What a wasted opportunity.
Yeah.
I could continue to nitpick this movie for a while. It just sometimes a movie has nice scenes, but they don't really come together as a story. And
Jason,
I really feel that's
I
the case
completely
in this
agree with
film.
you. Sorry, Jason. I didn't mean to do that.
No, it's all good.
No, I completely agree with you. And it's like the things I like about it that draw me in are these little pieces. And it's not coherent. It doesn't it's almost disappointing because it had enough things in it that could have been good. But these type of movies are so difficult to make. They're
Yeah.
so difficult. And if you look at the list of movies I listed that fall into the sword and sword, how many are good? How
Only
many?
Kroll.
None of them, and they're
Only
worse
Kroll.
than this one. Virtually all of them are
They're-
worse.
they're
Oh
really
no,
all-
Conan
they're
the
really all
Barbarian with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Come on,
Yeah,
Jason.
talk about dialogue.
The first Conan movie might be the best out of all these, and boy, is that saying a lot. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's saying
they're
a
all
lot.
pretty bad.
Yeah, it's like they focus so much on trying to set a theme and set you into this world that they fail to deal with the acting, the storyline. All of these things are so mediocre and so disjointed, and this was the opportunity where you had a story already before you that you didn't have to, and they. Yeah, there's a disappointing level on this, but there's something about Helen Mirren's character, and there's these pieces like I love watching her. I love watching her, even though her lines and her delivery's fine, even though the dialogue written for her is terrible and it's silly and all of this. It's just there's pieces of this, like I say, there's nuggets that I really enjoy, and so hence my costume.
Yeah.
It is fun to
I,
yell Liam Neeson right while you're
Right?
watching the movie because I had to, like, it woke my wife out of her slumber while we were watching this movie. And of course, I'm super excited to see Captain Jean-Luc Picard in this film. And Patrick
Right.
Stewart has never looked like more, like a badass than he does right here in
Mhm.
this film.
I agree.
Yeah,
I have to
they're
admit,
not on the screen very much.
they were not on the screen, and you're right, Jason. I more Patrick Stewart would have maybe made the film a little bit better.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Patrick Stewart, he wasn't any movie and TV wise, he wasn't anybody. He was a great actor at the RSC, but he wasn't. This was one of his first movies. Same with Liam Neeson. This is some of the first times they were on screen. Gabriel Byrne, who we haven't even mentioned, was Uther Pendragon, and what a powerhouse he is as an actor, or has been as an actor. And in many cases, these were the first times these people were on film. And it's interesting because we criticize it a lot, but I think the budget for this film was $10 million, and it made, I think, about $40 million. So, great for the investors, I'm sure. But $10 million, you couldn't hire Patrick Stewart today for $10 million to be in a movie. So it's amazing what they did with that. Again, with all the armory and all the other stuff that they built into it. So, I think there are some things that you have to keep in mind there. And yeah, Heather, I agree. There are some weird things. Like one of the most wonderful scenes that I adore, and somebody mentioned it earlier, so Guinevere and Lancelot are on this mossy embankment and they're making love and they're all wrapped up in each other and they wake up and Excalibur is between the two of them. Brilliant. However, that's from Tristan and Isolde. That scene is not actually in the traditional Arthurian myth. Obviously.
And that scene is not brilliant. It's terrible. Like, what was she thinking? Like, okay, I'm the queen. No one will notice that I'm gone tonight and I'm sleeping with someone else. Like it's completely nonsensical, right? I mean, Lancelot, I'm going to ride into the woods with you. I'm the queen of a kingdom. Like, you can't get away with that. And then Arthur, I'm just going to leave my magic sword here? Come on.
He was distraught.
Come on. That's bad storytelling. That's bad storytelling.
Well, one last thing I wanted to say on the dialogue real quickly, though, because we've made allusions to this movie before. Now, I'm the biggest Star Wars nerd on the planet, but go back and watch the dialogue in the original Star Wars movie. It's horrendous. And the plot flaws, horrendous, right? Like, it's just bad. And Princess Leia, who I love Space Mom more than anybody else, but like her interesting accent changes throughout the first movie are terrible. So we do also have to put this in context of the time, I think.
I want to address something that someone just said. I don't like when people tell Morgana's story incorrectly. She was not a bad fae. So this is a really important point when we're talking about witchcraft and witches. So speaking to John Matthews, and if you don't know who John Matthews is, he's an Arthurian scholar. He's in the UK. He's brilliant. He has deep knowledge of all of this stuff. And in the working with my book, I had to decide whether Morgana was considered a witch or not, because although the U.S. Film industry did not do a whole lot of Arthurian stories throughout its history, interestingly enough, they do appear on occasion. And so is she a witch or not? And he will decidedly tell you no. She is absolutely not a witch. So, yes. And in the case of this movie was, remember, this is the beginning of the Satanic Panic. This is a backlash against the progressive eras, a backlash against everything that happened in the 60s or 70s. Most of these films do have a Christian overlay that have a very good versus evil situation where magic tends to be evil or silly. So sometimes you'll see a silly character that's doing magic bumbling around, similar to what we see in like Sword in the Stone, which is Jason's favorite movie. And we see evil female witches or evil sorcerers. And so a lot of these movies have that. And it's a very black and white, very good versus evil Christian overlay that we see here. And so that's the role in this movie that she plays. And that happens very frequently. So what you said, Haley, was, it is upsetting because you are seeing that dichotomy, or seeing this magical woman, whether she's fae or not fae or whatever she is being put in the role of evil witch, which, is not necessarily the case. And of course, Mists of Avalon kind of rolls that on its head when you read the book. And we won't talk about the movie they made of that at this point.
Yeah, that was a movie.
We can go there another time.
I mean, Merlin, though, is clearly like a pagan figure, though, right?
Oh, yeah.
So the Christianity is sort of there, but I don't think it's a full-throated endorsement of the Christianity.
No, but it's interesting, right?
They do have to find the Grail. But like the idea that you're going to have a land without Merlin is, pretty damaging, right? And not necessarily an endorsement of letting go of that magic.
I would argue against that. But go ahead, Gwion.
No, I was just going to say that's the interesting thing about the Arthurian canon. I mean, outside of this movie as well, but certainly in this movie, is the whole idea, right? That it was and I'm going to really simplify this, but it was the old ways versus the new religion, right? Like that is the tension that's in these stories without a doubt. And, Arthur, the whole piece about him, sort of withering away is because he lost his connection to the land. And some of that, if you look at, is that he chose the wrong goddess to marry, right? So there's his sister, the Morgana love affair kind of thing that goes on. But he chose, because he thought it was the right thing, he chose Guinevere, who was the Christian, right? She was of the new religion, as opposed to the old religion. So there is that without this movie, there is all that tension. You can look at the Holy Grail. Obviously, that's one set of stories. But, Jason, you've been all around Glastonbury, and I'm sure other people on this call have as well. And, the Grail, maybe it's Christian. I mean, it's certainly Christianized now. But was that the matter of Britain, right? Like, was that actually going back further into some of the original myths from the Welsh triads, right? So there's lots of things like that in the movie where it absolutely clashes and overlays. You
bring up a good point though about the idea that he was with the wrong person, so the land suffers, right, which is very much a pagan idea.
Yeah, and it's all through Welsh mythology and British mythology.
Yeah, and then he had to kind of redeem things at the end, and also while watching the film, like, we're going to go out and find the Grail to save to save our country. And I'm like, yeah, because the Holy Grail of Jesus would definitely be in England. That makes complete sense.
Right.
Yeah.
That's all 12th century poetry, right? 13th century
I mean, I think my first thought was, let's ride to Jerusalem. Nope. Let's just go to the English countryside. It has to be there somewhere. Yeah.
And there's where you meet C-3PO.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I like Modred's armor.
That's
though.
where I stopped watching.
I like it. I loved Modred's
There he is,
armor.
C-3PO.
I think he looks creepy, and I love that he looks different than everybody else, which really sort of marks him as the bad guy.
Yeah.
But
Joffrey.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I liked about the movie. He just looked so unsettling.
Especially with like when his hair is all slicked back, when you see him without the mask on, he looks like an entitled little shit, doesn't he?
Someone called him Joffrey in a story. If you're familiar with Game of Thrones, they said he's Joffrey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he looks alien.
Yeah.
Even to everyone else there. Like, he's like, when he's with Morgan, he looks alien. When he's in his armor, he looks alien. He doesn't. And that's like kind of the problem is, with his character is he's the love child of, incest, essentially.
Yeah.
He doesn't belong in that world. He looks alien. His character doesn't belong. He is the bad guy. Like, for as much, critique as I can give his character's costume, like it fits with the narrative quite well. Even though it kind of throws me off.
He's also like svelte in a way that the other characters aren't, like the way his armor looks.
Yeah.
Everybody else looks very big and bulky, and his armor almost looks sleek. It's really different.
In reality, that armor would not. What would you do with that armor? There's nothing you could actually do. And the scene where he's torturing the knights and trying to get them to renounce Arthur. They're so much bigger than he is, and this is clearly plastic, spray painted plastic.
It'd be great for a Friday night date. I've worn worse.
And this movie was nominated for, I think, a couple of Oscars. That's a question.
Yeah, it was all set design stuff.
Yeah,
right?
It was like lighting and photography and stuff. Obviously not for actors.
No, this movie, like if you go back and you read the reviews, there were two types of reviews from this movie. Brilliant and what the hell were they thinking? Those are the only two types of reviews. It was either panned or praised. There was nothing in the middle.
There was some people that recognized, like, like I have said, and like some of us have said, there's pieces of this that are really good, but there's pieces of this that are really problematic. And so I think you see some mixed reviews, but it was not it's a cult film. It's one of the films we chalk this is not necessarily for everybody, but it's a cult film that people just love to watch. I mean, I went to, and I can talk about this for a minute, is several years ago, I went to Dragon Con dressed in my Morgana costume with a good friend of mine who was dressed as Merlin. And so we walked around, and I don't know if our producers have that shot of us, but we walked around Dragon Con in our costumes, and it's very rare you see people cosplaying from this movie. And so we got a lot of everybody was older, because everybody that saw the movie were older, and they were like, oh my goodness, look at you guys. So that was really fun. It is something that people recognize. It is some people of a certain age really love. So there is a cult following for it. But there's one thing I want to bring up that we haven't talked about yet. And that is the charm of making, which I'd like to recite right now.
Oh, so glad.
If smoke starts to come out of my mouth, I may have to turn the camera off. So, Anal Nathrak Uthras Bethu Dohel Dienbe.
Yeah.
Anal Nathrak Uthvas Bethu Dohel Dienbe.
Anal Nathrak.
And that's the best line in the whole film.
I love it.
It is. It's one of the classic best charms that we see in movies. People recognize this if they love it. Anal Nathrak.
Yeah.
And I just love to say that. I just like to say that first part. It's very cool.
Yeah.
That's the best part of the movie almost. That one scene where they are in there and she's repeating it. There it is. There's my photo. there we
That's
are.
fabulous.
We walked around Dragon Con dressed like that.
And if you wondered if Heather was evil, now you know. It's all out there.
There we are.
We have photographic proof of Heather's evilness. She's right there.
You know what I love, Heather, because now that you're saying it, like I'm just picturing the scene, because, Merlin says it a few times, but there's that great scene where he encourages, shall we say, Morgana to say it. And as she's saying, he's like, oh, that's good. Better than I ever was. His Nicol Williams voicing of that character is just brilliant. It's so cheeky.
It's cheeky. I think that's a better word for it. It's not brilliant. I'm not so sure. Cheeky is good. There's moments where I'm like, why did he phrase something like that? That was weird. But yeah, Anal Nathrak. I love just saying it.
Yeah. So the weird thing about it, right? So Jason, you'll love this reference. Maybe Markus, you'll get this. A few others might. So in the vaunted and esteemed book, The 21 Lessons of Merlin.
Oh no.
Oh no.
No, it's not vaunted or esteemed. I jest. But in that book, which is terrible, they mention that this is an old Welsh charm. So first of all, it's not Welsh.
No.
It's not remotely Welsh.
No.
It's sort of middle-ish Irish, oldish Irish, but it doesn't actually mean what it says. It's mostly gobbledygook. But in the 21 Lessons of Merlin, it basically says this charm has been handed down to us over the centuries as it was originally written. How many Druid writings do we have?
0.
Actual Druid writings from 2,000, 4,000 years ago? How many? Oh, yeah, 0.
0.
So it's a mess. But I was at a pagan festival, I think in Oakland, and my apologies in case anybody watching this is one of those folk. But there were a group of people that got up and to open the pagan festival recited Anal Nathrak Vas Buthaid as like the opening prayer. And I was like, oh, God.
Oh,
really?
no.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
that's a choice.
But I will say, though, magic evolves. And, when we think of even, Star Trek, and it actually was a Jewish blessing that you would bless people. And even the horned magus in Italy, that was a symbol of blessings and driving away evil. And then now it's associated since the 80s with heavy metal. So magic does evolve, and pop culture does infiltrate into magic.
Yeah.
So maybe it is silly that they weren't, it wasn't actually any real, it was gobbledygook, but to them it really was something that they felt very empowered by. And I think even though it's, we know that it's not real necessarily, but it becomes real to them and it becomes an egregore. So there is some power in, it's sort of like, it reminds me of in that, what was it? It was that Tim Allen movie where they
the Santa Claus.
No, it was a knockoff of Star Trek.
I know which one.
Galaxy Quest.
And it was Alan
Rickman.
And it was, by Grapthar's hammer you shall be avenged. And as the actor, he hated, the fans wanted, by Grapthar's hammer you will be avenged. And then it turns up when he's trying to save someone and he needs to help this guy channel his strength, he says, by Grapthar's hammer you shall be avenged, or Trelluck, or whatever he's saying. And it's just a little mantra that helps them in the moment. It's silly, perhaps. It's not really what it means, but it means something to them. And I like the fact that magic does evolve that way.
Yeah, that's very true.
I think that it's important to add on to what you're saying here. And I did a study on this, and I have an unpublished paper on this, is the importance of pop culture and its relationship to spirituality and religion. And that in many cases, as religion, as formal and traditional religions wane in our culture, pop culture takes the place. And you can see things like Dragon Con, like that I went to, and a lot of the conferences we go to as pagans, or a lot of other conferences that all of us have gone to, will take that place. And you see that with and my study involved the bronies, it involved Star Trek fandoms, it involved all these fandoms. That, yes, you're right, these things become meaningful in more than just a silly thing, and they are more. So for some of us, they're silly, yes, but for some of us, they're not so silly, and they do become meaningful because they give our lives meaning. They give purpose. They give meaning. They give depth to us. They give us a lot of things that are just as meaningful and purposeful and important as religion does in a lot of cases. So yes, you're absolutely correct, and I think a lot of the things that pagans have used have come from sources that are not expressly pagan, not expressly religion. And we've adapted them, and they become, because we imbue them with meaning. And like you said, magic is adaptable. Magic can be, I know people who have used pop culture and pop culture magic. I'm very much a fan of that. And I know that a lot of us, and some of us sitting here perhaps, have used pop culture elements in our rituals. So yeah.
I will tell you, Heather.
Absolutely right.
I have a quick question, though, before we're done.
Yeah.
Why? There have been so many retellings of Arthur over the years.
Yeah.
And obviously, these stories have been told for almost 1,000 years, and there's a great love for them. Why is Hollywood unable to get this right?
My personal feeling on it is that it's a really good myth is allegorical. How many great movies are there that you can name that are brilliant adaptations of Greek myths? There aren't that many. Right. So
Harry Hamlin. That's easy. Come on.
But come on now.
Come on, that movie's awful
that's
too.
as good and as accurate as Excalibur.
That's true.
But
it's
you get the idea. There's just I think it's very hard to encapsulate myth when you're expressly going for myth. That's why I think what was so good about Star Wars, right, is that it made this epic space movie that had mythical undertones to it, as opposed to being a movie about a myth. And I think that's really the hard part, is what's the entry point of a myth? And that dives right into psychology. And one last thing that I just have to say, just because I don't want to be like the complete prick on the phone here, but the bit about pop culture and, Anal Nathrak being used, I'm all for it. It was disconcerting when I heard it, because those folks believed that they were speaking an ancient tongue. That's the bit that was challenging about it. But I have somebody's posting in here about, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina and whatnot. I will tell you, every Samhain, I have midnight margaritas, and that comes from the movie Practical Magic, and I fucking love it, and that's just all there is to it. So absolutely, we incorporate what makes us feel.
We are coming upon the time, so we have to vote. We have to raise our wands. If we like this movie, you at home too. Do you like this movie? Are you going to raise your wands? Do you not like this movie? What are you going to do? And I don't have my wand here, so I'm going to bring out something very special. And on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, wands up, wands down.
Is that up or down, Richard-Lael? I can't tell.
For the birds.
It's for the birds.
It's for the birds. I'm going to give it the bird. This is a family show, and this is the best that I can do.
I just can't give this a thumbs up. I mean, it plods along. It's too long. It's a great investment of time. It may be only 2 hours and 20 minutes, but I'm with Richard-Lael. It feels like it's 4 hours long.
Mm-mm.
It's a long one. It's definitely a long one. I mean, it's not. There's some good things about it, like we all discussed. The acting is acting. The costumes are definitely nice. The lighting is. So I can't fully say it's down, but will I ever watch this movie again? That is the question. No, I will not.
Watch Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves instead. If you're going to do a movie based on British mythology, I much prefer that. Yeah, we can talk about that some other day.
Well, and why can't they get it right? I think Gwion's right. It's a complicated myth, and it's a myth, and they just keep doing what they want. It's not history in so much, and Hollywood has a really hard time with medieval stuff. They just overdo it. And I think that's a lot of, and this wasn't expressly Hollywood, but
except for
yes.
Prince of Thieves, which is a terrific film, minus Costner. Kevin Costner.
We'll get to that another day, right?
Yeah, it has a witch in it. Oh my God.
Minus
we
the main
should do
character.
that movie because it has a witch in it.
Any movie with a witch.
Yeah.
Helen Mirren deserved better. I like that because I do enjoy watching her.
Thankfully, she had the Fast and the Furious franchise to fall back on in her later years.
We are coming upon a time. We are quickly approaching the end. So let's quickly go through, and we'll greet our guests first. Tell us where we can find you. Tell us your next adventure. Gwion, please go. You can go there first.
Oh my gosh. So you can get my books, The Magick of Food. That's a good place to find me. Life Ritualized, another book that I wrote. You can find me at The Witches Next Door. Anywhere. If you type in Gwion Raven, I'll pop up all over the place, and you can find me on all the places.
Very good. And Markus.
You can find me on Instagram at Markus Ironwood. That's Markus with a K. I just kind of post my pictures, my life. And then if you're listening to any sort of witchy podcast out there, there's a good chance that I have hooked some authors up to that. So I'm behind the scenes, which I kind of like. But at Markus Ironwood, if you want to see my gay life.
Very good. Ms. Heather Greene. Yes, you can find me at heathergreene.net, not .com, .net. And there you'll find links to my articles that I write, mostly on Religion News Service, which you can go directly and search me there. And I, again, do articles on these subjects. And you can also find me on all the socials, Twitter or whatever it's called now, and Threads or whatever that's called now, and Facebook and all the things. I'm in all those places. And you can find my book anywhere good books are sold.
Very good. Jason Mankey.
First of all, thanks Gwion and Markus for being here with us tonight. It's nice to extend our family at the Witches Movie Coven. I'm one of 4 Jason Mankeys in the United States. I'm the one that you'll find, much to the chagrin of the other 3. And I'll be at the Festival of Souls in Memphis, Tennessee in October, and Las Vegas Pagan Pride in November. And I'm really excited that I'm not going to be away from home again until October. Oh, praise the gods. Cannot wait just to be home. It's been a long summer of travel.
And I am, thank you, Jason. And I am Richard-Lael Lillard. Richard-Lael is one name, not 2. If I were just Richard, I'd be Anyway, I'm going to be at Debauchery Ball in Atlanta coming up here on the 2nd of September, where I get to fortunately and finally get to meet my dear friend, Ms. Heather Greene. And you can find there at Debauchery Ball. All of the event is there. You can also find me at thegentlemanpsychic.com. And you can find me anywhere good Richard-Lael Lillards are sold. There are bad ones, but you can also find the good one too. There is one thing we have to do. And those of you at home, we know what to do. For those of you who are here, we cackle, which is always cackle. So at the count of 3, we're all going to cackle. What do you think?